Hello and welcome to another LinkedIn Live. We are 6 Seconds Europe, and it is our pleasure to have you with us for this Lunch and Learn session, where today we are going to explore finding your noble goal. It's this time of the year that many of us, as we approach the festive season and the new year, start to think about taking time off to rest and reflect. Now, I don't know about you, but maybe you're someone who looks at New Year's Eve resolutions, New Year's resolutions, in fact, and tries to think about some goals that you might set for the next year, for the coming year. But how often do you keep them? The point we want to get towards today is that you can actually think about a more noble goal, and kickstarting your EQ in 2022 may be the time where you really think about doing that. I'd like to welcome today our special guest, Fergal O'Keefe, who is our producer and host of our 6 Seconds Europe Moments of Clarity podcast. Fergal, thanks for joining me today.
Great to see you.
Absolutely. Now, Fergal, you're based in Ireland. I'm in Vienna. That's right. Where in Ireland are you?
So I'm in Clonmel in Tipperary in Ireland, the very middle of Ireland. So I have to say I'm in very much a festive mood because once this is over, I'm going to head into town and get my sponges that I order every year for to make my sherry trifle, family tradition.
Ooh, like a sponge that you eat.
Exactly.
Yeah, very nice.
I went into the shop yesterday and they said, no, I got the date wrong. And they said, I do it every year. I always get the date wrong. So
So you're always in a moment early. Yeah, wow.
exactly.
Interesting. And so tell me, Fergal, do you set, you and your family, do you set New Year's resolutions at all?
I do. I'm a bit of a cliche. I was brushing my teeth this morning. I was going, yeah, January, I definitely need to go on a diet and I need to do more exercise. And then I
Okay.
was going, I think I was saying this time last year as well. So
Yeah, right. And do you find then that you keep those New Year's resolutions, or do they
yeah,
somehow fizzle out, do you think?
well, I'm always good at the start in January. It's just to keep it going for the rest of the year. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's the key, I think. And also, it can be anything.
Mm,
Even
yeah.
read more books is always on my list. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess the thing we want to explore today a little bit is the fact that we often, I think there's quotes around 80, 90% of people fail in their New Year's resolutions. And what we want to work towards in this moment, not only in today's live, but we have another live in early January on the 5th, where we'll have a special guest, and then a workshop on January the 19th, where we want to focus in this moment, this time of the year, around noble goals, which in the 6 Seconds framework is part of our KCG model in the Give Yourself, which includes empathy and pursue noble goals. And the definition of a noble goal is to connect your daily choices with an overarching sense of purpose. So these daily decisions that we make connected with our overarching sense of who we are and how we show up in the world. And the point to make here is that with noble goal, if you have a noble goal in place, this actually allows you to enhance all the other competencies of emotional intelligence that we're going to explore in 2022. So we're going to hear Fergal's story in a moment, because I know Fergal, we've discussed that you came to us through the podcast and you've got a noble goal. So just for our listeners, for those watching at the moment, I want to give you 5 tips, 5 areas to focus on in the next, say, 2 or 3 weeks. Maybe you join our next live and we go a little deeper, but 5 things to think about in terms of establishing a noble goal. And these were founded by Annabelle Jensen, our founder of 6 Seconds, who talked about that a noble goal, firstly, shouldn't be completed in your lifetime. So we talk about this overarching sense of purpose. It's really about, like, in some ways, a huge undertaking that you may not finish. It may be your legacy to pass on to others. So we really are focused on our long-term thinking. And I think in this pandemic, we've had a lot of short-term thinking. So going long is a really important point here. It should be pointed outward. The second point here, it's the benefit is on others. And in doing so, that benefits you. So it is cyclical in that way, but our focus is on benefiting society, our community, those with whom that we interact. It should integrate different domains or dimensions of our life. So it's just not one area, like you mentioned, diet before, Fergal, or exercise. It might be something that includes holistic lifestyle, all facets of what we do, and can really create and support, your family or your community, and bringing in multiple voices as well. One aspect that Annabelle Jensen talks about in a video that she put up is about that it should get you out of bed. So every morning, this is the daily choices that come with a noble goal that really help you spring and move forward and get out of bed with energy and vigor, or at least to make a choice. Okay, I can get out of bed and I can take one step towards this vision that I have. And finally, the fifth dimension to consider in this holiday time is that no one should be made to feel less. So we're not wrong in pursuing a noble goal. We're not putting others down or making people feel less than. It's really removing our ego and our power struggle when it comes to our noble goals. So these are our 5 aspects to consider. But let's delve deeper, Fergal, into your story about your involvement with 6 Seconds in the Moments of Clarity podcast. And if you haven't checked out that podcast, we're now in season 2. Fergal can tell you a bit more about it, but it's a tremendous podcast and something that, on a fairly weekly basis, a regular basis, you can digest some really cool ideas and thoughts from other people. So Fergal, tell us more about that and maybe how you arrived at a noble purpose and a noble goal.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. Those 5 points, I was just looking at them and they all apply to me. And maybe the first one, not complete in your lifetime, can seem a bit daunting, but it's not actually at all, because if you've got something that you can always do throughout your life, then it is a great target to have. So all of those would fit into my story, I suppose, because just to tell you a little bit about me, I have a hospitality business in Tipperary. We have a couple of bars and a nightclub and a hotel. So in March 2020, that was got all closed with the COVID restrictions, and the nightclub actually since then, that was March 2020, and the nightclub actually is only open for a couple of weeks since then, since March, so nearly 2 full years.
Wow.
And at the time, I was just starting to do, I'd started a brain profiler and a few little things with emotional intelligence. It was an area that I was interested in. And all of a sudden I had loads of time in my hands. So like a lot of people. So, I wanted to stay positive, because you could have looked in that situation where, say, your businesses are closed and you didn't know when they were going to open. But I wanted to use that time for the positive, to learn some new things. So what got me into, I did the EQPC course, and that it was very good from the point of view. I did that in July time, and that really got me my head clear about the idea of noble goals and the idea of having targets and things to look for. So then in the autumn, at the time I was going, what do I love the most and what do I miss? And at the time it was travel, because the whole world was in lockdown. And I actually started doing my own podcast, which was called Travel Tales with Fergal. And that the idea was interviewing people about the 5 favorite places that they've traveled, or journalists and all sorts of different people about their travels, because I felt if there's a lot of people like me, just because you can travel doesn't mean you can't dream about it and think about it. So I got into that. And then where my noble goal point came in, and I think this is where, if you have an idea about what you love and what you're interested in, and if you can connect that then up with a noble goal, that's where the magic really happens. So for me, I love this. I love traveling. I love writing, but I never really had the time to get into writing or podcasting. So I used that, instead of sort of feeling sorry for myself because my business were closed, I used the time to start the podcast. I started writing. And then out of that, I started writing a travel column for a local paper, doing travel slots on a couple of radio stations, doing my travel podcast. And it made me realize that I absolutely loved doing the podcasting. And as you can hear from me now, talking to people. So, and after doing my EQPC course, I sort of aligned it to doing something that I love, but also a noble goal. So I said, if I can do my own podcast, I can do this for other people. And that's how, through 6 seconds, I got the idea of the Moments of Clarity podcast. And that's where I say that your noble goal aligns with your own personal goals, because For me, it was doing podcasting for companies and for myself and my love of doing that. But from a noble goal point of view, it was helping people in those dark times. I wanted, the idea of the podcast was to tell people to talk about 3 moments in their life to lead to a change, or to inspirational stories. So to help people. And that's what I really learned over the last year. I've interviewed business people and people involved with, coaches, with EQ coaches, politicians, so from a noble goal point of view, it's not, so for me, it's doing the podcasting. That's what I get out of it, and something I love, to get you out of bed in the morning, as you say. But then from a noble goal point of view, for helping other people, hopefully what that podcast does, and the Travel Tales one, is inspiring stories to help people, particularly at the moment. Particularly, there was a lot of business people that I interviewed, talking about working from home and like this, and hybrid working, and how to deal with their staff. And that's where emotional intelligence has become so important. That's really shone through over the last year. So if you can see, my own goals interconnected with a noble goal. And it was, and I actually did a post yesterday on my own page on LinkedIn, Fergal O'Keefe, yesterday about it, saying this time last year, that was my resolution. And it was connected to my noble goal. And the idea was, I love doing something I love, which was travel and writing, podcasting. And then I said, I can do this for other people. And since then, I've done not just for 6 seconds, but for DCU. And I did one called Teachers Inspire Ireland, which was a series which was for Ireland, about people telling inspiring stories about teachers. And everybody's got that one teacher that inspired them. So it was a beautiful, positive thing, hearing these inspiring stories for teachers. So if you can see, my whole year, all the podcasts I've done, the one thing that's connected to them is inspiring stories. And that's the word that I've seen a lot with EQ, and particularly with noble goals, is inspiring. So subconsciously, I think I was doing that. And where the EQPC course came in is it just gave me a little bit of direction.
Yes.
As you wrote there, the steps and how to look for it, and not to be daunted by it. And it doesn't have, mine, you could say, started as a hobby and went into work, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. You might just go, this year, I'm going to focus on work, but I'm also going to start writing. Because when I started writing, I hadn't really written bar work stuff, personally written. I hadn't written since school. And all of a sudden I started writing these articles. So maybe it might be to start writing, or it might be to podcast, or so it doesn't necessarily have to be a work thing. But this year it was lovely to say, I did that post yesterday, that this time last year I had this idea of pursuing something that I loved, and also for work and as a noble goal. And I've achieved that in the last year, and hopefully grow it again, because season 2 of the Moments of Clarity podcast, and it's available on all podcasting platforms. That's finished. Season 2 finished last week. Season 3 will start again in the new year. And it is some great inspiring stories. Like, just to give you an example, like people, like I had, my last guest was that he was tipped at one stage to be the Prime Minister of Ireland, and he was a minister in the Irish government, and he was a radio host on one of the biggest radio stations called News Talk in Ireland. But he was so inspiring because he's changed his job so many times. But as he said, and I've had 2 guests in the last week said the same thing, that perseverance and perspiration, rather than being smart, is what counts. Like, I had a person the other day, is one of the top people in GM, and he said it's 99% perspiration, 1% being smart. And I think that's a lovely message,
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I know with goals, we often think about SMART goals, an acronym for, I forget the words right now, but they have to be timely and measurable and these kinds of things. But what I'm loving hearing from you, Fergal, is that you had your own change to consider. And then it sounds like you found 6 seconds, or you knew people who directed you in there. And for those watching who aren't sure, EQPC is our Emotional Intelligence Practitioner course. It's a 3 to 5 day course. Fergal has done it. I've done it. Many people can do it. You can sign up on our events page to do it. I think there's one coming next March. You said, Fergal, in March. They happen throughout the year, throughout the world, certainly here in Europe. But this is a real deep dive into the whole competencies that you see behind me, but especially this noble goal. And I love this idea of finding what you love and what you're interested in, what you're good at, what you have skill in. And you have a beautiful voice, I can say, as an opera singer and as a voice coach myself. And I always love listening to you and listening to your podcast because it feels soothing, it feels warm. And you mentioned part of your purpose and goal for this podcast is in these pandemic times to offer people inspiration. I think that really fulfills that idea too, that it's beyond your lifetime. Because the wonderful part that we live in now in this digital age is that your podcasts, these 2 seasons and 3rd season coming, will remain with us. So maybe in 5 years, there's still the richness that's there now for people to explore and to go into further and to be inspired by the interviews that you've conducted.
And
That's
can I
really
just say,
great.
like that first point, like not too complete in your lifetime,
Mm-hmm.
might seem daunting, but I actually love that idea. Just say for me doing podcasting, I joke going, I could be podcasting when I'm 90 from home.
Yeah.
And that's something I learned that the amount of things now in the last year that you can do from home and do yourself, but
Yeah.
also the idea that I can do that forever. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I think so it's not something to be afraid about or say, oh God, that's too big, I can't start, whether it's a little
Yeah.
project helping locally with somebody, the idea that it's your lifetime, I look at that as a positive.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a marathon, not a sprint,
Yeah,
they often
exactly.
say. So, I mean, that's really, really wonderful. And it clearly gets you out of bed in the morning. So, just as an aside, you've got season 3 coming. How do you find the guests? Or are people starting to approach you? Or is it a bit of both? Or, yeah, how do you
Yeah.
find out you're inspiring people?
So it's a bit of both, and I mean, it's just the world. I mean, for example, in season 1, I had Joe Burry, who's based in the UK, whose father had been killed in the Brighton bombing by the IRA, and then she spent the rest of her life working on peace and reconciliation, and
Mhm.
made up with the bomber, and now
Mhm.
does talks with him in war-torn countries around the world. So you
Mhm.
couldn't get a more inspiring story, and that's a
Yeah.
UK story.
Yeah.
So it is sort of it. Again, this is something that I've always been interested in. So I'm one of those people that, I read the papers every day, and I'm reading the news and reading books.
Mhm.
So I just have lists and lists and lists of inspiring people. But if somebody thinks they do have a story, and it can be, the other thing I just want to emphasize, the ones I've told you about are some of the big ones, like
Yeah.
one of my second last guests was a guy who cycled from Ireland to Athens over the last few months. But
Mhm.
people get very small stories as well. It's just about changes, 3 changes in their life that
Yeah.
led to a change for the positive. So it can be
Mm.
big and small stories. So it can literally be anybody.
Yeah, this is great, and this is really, in the we're going to go further in the next live and the workshop into a noble goal. But a noble goal is about regular change. It's about seeing that long term, and then seeing that, as you say, what can I do today, or what small changes that lead to bigger outcomes can we make along the way? Seeing that it's a long term focus, not just
Yeah.
not for now.
But also, this idea, like now, you're just thinking about something small. So mine was, I would say, small. This time last year, I had just started to do a podcast,
Okay.
and I'd started to write a little bit.
Yes.
Then I was contacted by a paper to do a travel column. Then I was
Hmm.
contacted by a radio station. Then I was
Wow.
contacted by another radio station. So now I have a weekly
Yes.
travel column and 2 weekly travel slots. But they
Wow.
contacted me through the podcast.
Okay.
And that original podcast was my own one. And through
Yes.
that, 6 seconds happened. The Teachers Inspire one happened. So,
Mm.
in other words, people came to me through
Yes.
me doing something for myself during the
Yeah.
lockdown. So it can
Yes.
start very small. And then, when you start doing something that you're very passionate about and that you
Mm.
love, it can bring you in directions in your life.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer in that. And now
Yeah.
I've seen my own story in the last
Mhm.
year, how
Mhm.
that has happened. And when people always say that, even when they talk about writing, write about something that you know or something that you're
Mm.
interested in. And
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to be for work. It can be something outside of work, or it can be
Yeah.
in work and,
Yeah.
asking to do something. But by
Yeah.
taking those steps, because I
Mm.
could easily, it still happens, the imposter syndrome. I'm
Yes.
right. I'm writing an article or doing a podcast, and I'm going like,
Mm.
how can I do this?
Yeah.
You know? And then you meet someone who thanks you for it. And
Yes.
like I was in town the other day, and someone came up to me going, they read my article every week. And
Uh-huh.
I think of those people when I'm writing articles now, the ones that come up to me, and it
Yes.
makes it easier and makes me
Yep.
up my game.
Yeah, you're thinking of them. They're part of the pointed outward approach to the noble
Exactly.
goal that you're focused on. I can identify that person. And I really love what
Exactly.
you're saying, that these aren't work-related things. So often with goals, we focus them down to the narrow, smallest part about work or weight loss or book reading or whatever it is that we choose. But a noble goal could be nothing to do with work, but how you serve the community, how you show up in the world, and how you live your life with these guiding principles. And I know Catherine Roth, our regional director, used the two words, with courage and with compassion. And we're going to go further into these words in our next LinkedIn Live. So, and just so I'm clear on the timeline, Fergal, when did the EQPC come? Did that come before lockdown, during lockdown, or before the podcast?
So this time last year, I was
Yeah,
doing my own one, and then
yeah,
the EQ, the 6 seconds one started
yeah,
this year. So it was
yeah.
still, it was, in and out of lockdown.
Wonderful.
So, and like a point that comes across throughout the podcast is people
Mhm,
going, this idea of hybrid working and working from
mhm,
home. And
mhm.
before the lockdown, the idea of interviewing people, like, as I said, my last guest was tipped to be Prime Minister of Ireland,
Mhm.
and you might never have gotten that person in the past, but now people they've gotten used to this idea of talking to each other, doing interviews,
Yes.
um, over. So there, I would, in other words, I put in a line saying, every cloud is a silver lining, or
Mhm,
always seek the
mhm.
light. And
Yeah,
in my post on LinkedIn yesterday, and that's
yeah,
the key in these times, because even
yeah.
now, you would, if you go onto Twitter, you would see a lot of negativity.
Mm,
And the key is, my post yesterday was, I started this time last year with one, and since then I've done 6 different ones for 6 different
mhm.
companies.
Okay.
In other words, that dark cloud, the silver lining was me getting
Yeah.
the time to go
Yes.
off in this direction that I
Yes.
actually probably always wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah. And do you still have those businesses?
Yeah, they're there. They're
They
close.
may they're
They're
closed
in
now? Yeah?
well in Ireland. So now
Mm.
what they've made it 8 o'clock. So
Right, right.
it's as
So there
good as
may come
closed.
a time where you could deliver your podcast or do your podcast live from the pub or live from the nightclub.
Yeah,
Why not?
exactly.
Bring in a guest or have a video link up in this hybrid environment, as you say. Maybe your worlds will cross again.
Well, they
Um,
kind of do, because I interview like musicians. I've a
okay.
comedy club, and I've interviewed a
Yes.
couple of comedians, and my
Wow.
Travel Tales one. I've one coming out after Christmas. One of
Okay.
the comedians in the UK.
That's
So
amazing.
that has come out of that, actually.
Yeah. So, Fergal, where can we find all of your podcasts, but in particular,
Mhm.
Moments of Clarity as well?
So the Moments of Clarity podcast, it's on the 6 Seconds website, but
Mhm.
probably the easiest thing, you just type in Moments of Clarity, Journeys with EQ, and
Yes.
then it's on wherever you get your podcast. So if you get them on Apple, if you get them on Google, if you
Yes.
get them on Acast, wherever you get them, it's on all podcasting platforms. So if you
Great.
list, the easiest probably just type in Acast Moments of Clarity, and you'll
Mhm.
get it there.
Super. And otherwise, people can connect with you on LinkedIn, which
Exactly.
is also great. You can find all of us on LinkedIn, but also our 6 Seconds Europe LinkedIn page is where we keep you up to date with all that's happening within the 6 Seconds Europe network. And we have regular community calls, practice clubs. We have upcoming courses like the EQPC that Fergal has completed, brain brief profiling, all sorts of ways in which you can enhance your emotional intelligence. And this is the time of the year, as we are on the cusp of 2022. We really want you to think about kickstarting your EQ in 2022 with these tools, with this advice, with people inspiring stories like Fergal's that you've heard today. So please come and join us, connect with us. We want to share in this journey with you and help you to establish a noble goal. So hopefully today has given you some inspiration from Fergal's story, as well as from understanding these 5 critical points when it comes to emotional intelligence and setting a noble goal. We'll put some more links into the LinkedIn page. So if you want to follow up on this discussion, please do. And the next opportunity to join us with some questions and some comments, like we had Alistair today, would be on January the 5th. And we will have a very special guest there as well. Then we're going to have a workshop on the 19th of January. This is a free workshop. So if you've enjoyed our last workshop, which was back in just a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, in fact, in early December, we had a good 27 participants come, which was wonderful. Very interactive workshop. And that's the way we're designing these as well for you, to give you some ideas to take away. And if you then want to take further steps in our programs, you're more than welcome. Please come and join our community. Fergal, a special thanks to you today in your busy schedule. I know with Christmas coming, you've got to go and get the sponges now. Or you've gotten the sponges.
No, I'm getting them. That's
You're
next.
going now, yeah.
To make a sherry trifle, tradition in Ireland.
A traditional recipe in the family as well, is it? This
trifle? Oh, very much. My father, grandfather, me, and the Irish tradition with the sherry trifle is lots of sherry. That's the key.
Wow. That's the key. All right. Well, yeah, maybe we can pop a special recipe for this festive season onto our website, or at least check in with Fergal if you'd like that recipe, the family recipe. So Fergal, thanks very much for your time today. And thank you to those who have watched on. We hope you have a wonderful festive season and a nice walk into the 2020. I was thinking of the German, we say Frohe Weihnachten and Guten Rutsch. The Guten Rutsch means a slide into, I love that expression, to slide into the new year. So we wish you well wherever you are, and we look forward to staying connected with you. Take care, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.